is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today I have got a really exciting video to share with you guys, as I was actually lucky enough to get to interview Tompen Andersson from Ripple Effect Studios in an exclusive one-on-one interview, and I got to ask about 20 questions in regards to Battlefield Portal. I want to give a massive shout out to Steph Lung for setting up this interview. She's been so great to me in setting both this one and the last one up, and I'm super grateful for the opportunity, so thank you, Steph, if you are listening, and also a big thank you to Tompen for taking the interview as well. Now, I'm not allowed to use the actual recording of the video, but I'm essentially just going to go through what I asked and then sort of paraphrase the answers. So just keep in mind these aren't word for word responses, but I'll obviously stick as close to his answers as I can while essentially just shortening them for the video. Hopefully it's not too boring of a format for you guys, so let me know what you think down below so that I can obviously improve these types of videos moving forward if I am lucky enough to get more interviews in the future. But anyway, with that out of the way, guys, let's get stuck into the questions and answers, as well as some of my own thoughts sprinkled in there as well. So the first question I asked was, what was the driving force behind you and the team wanting to create this experience in Battlefield 2042? Tompen answered by saying that, at least for him personally, as he can't speak for the entire team, obviously he has a really long history with Battlefield, and he said that they see some of the things that the community create. For example, back in some of the older games there was a really solid modding community, and so in the more recent titles they've wanted to give the community some tools to pretty much create their own servers and stuff like that, and that this is essentially just taking that to a whole other level in terms of what they think we can create as a community. He essentially doubled down by saying that this is genuinely a love letter to the fans, like they initially described it as. It's something that they think we'd love to have as a community, and that's really their main focus, just giving the fans something that they think everyone will really enjoy. Now, my next question was, what went into deciding on the maps that were added to Battlefield Portal? Tompen mentioned that most of what went into their map choices was to do with data collection, so seeing which maps got played the most and stuff like that, but that was actually only the case for Bad Company 2 and the Battlefield 3 maps, because Battlefield 1942 came out so long ago, and back then they didn't really track that kind of data, or at least they didn't really have access to that data anyway. He said that for the 1942 maps, they partly went on their own favourites as a team, but they did still do quite a bit of research, actually going through the old forums and essentially collecting some data from the forums just to make sure that their choices were in line with the community, because they obviously didn't want it to be too subjective, and I personally think they nailed the choices across all three games. Honestly, the Battlefield 3 and Bad Company 2 maps are actually 4 of probably my top 10 favourite maps in the franchise, so I am definitely happy with their choices. Now, the next question that I asked was, will the remastered maps have different changes other than just updated assets and graphics, so stuff like these smaller types of evolution, like raising bridges and stuff like that? He mentioned that they have tried to stay as faithful to the original maps as they possibly could, just to respect the maps and not have them be completely different, but there are some small changes to certain aspects. For example, Battle of the Bulge and Al Alamein actually didn't have any destruction, and so even though the layout of the maps are exactly the same, technically they are slightly different, because now buildings can be blown up and all that good stuff that we can expect from Battlefield. So it will be exciting to see how those maps play with destruction added to them. On top of that though, just allowing more players is also a slight change. So Tompen mentioned that obviously Eureka Harbor Rush was designed for only 24 players back when it launched, but there's actually nothing standing in the way of the community making 128 player rush lobbies on Eureka Harbor. And so again, even though the actual maps are the same, the way in which we can play them now is going to be completely new at times, just depending on, you know, what rules the community set for their own games. So we could do 24 player rush on Eureka Harbor, or we could do 128 player rush on Eureka Harbor. They really just want to give us complete freedom in how we experience these maps. Now, the next question was definitely a bit of a prying question from me. I tried to milk a little bit of new info here, because why not? And the question was, will cross-generation be allowed in the Battlefield Portal if I'm on Xbox Series X and make a 64 player lobby? Does that mean that I can play with previous gen players if I set all the rules to something that is actually within the previous generation's capabilities? Now, Tompen was a little bit hesitant to answer this one, and rightly so. He mentioned that he doesn't actually know the exact answer to it, other than that they pretty much want to allow our games to work on as many platforms as possible, but whether it can actually work on cross-generation, he just genuinely wasn't sure yet. A lot of people might take that as sort of dodging the answer, but Tompen was giving really in-depth answers to every question prior to this, and I'd imagine this is just something that they're literally not quite sure on yet, whether it's even possible or whatever the case may be. So it was definitely interesting what he said about wanting our games to work on as many platforms as possible, but I'm not going to read into it too much until we actually get a more definitive answer. Now, they confirmed XP gain will occur in Battlefield Portal, so you can level up and everything in this mode, and I asked, will XP gain in this mode be the same as the base game, or will it be slightly different to avoid players manipulating it to level up quicker than intended? Tompen mentioned that it will be a 1-to-1 XP gain, meaning it will be exactly the same in the base game, but he did clarify that there will be certain limitations to stop exactly that, in terms of players just setting up some sort of like glitched out mode where you can max out your levels in one game or something. So that was a great answer, and it sounds like that is pretty much the best of both worlds for me personally. Now, the next question was, how challenging has it been working on this game while COVID has pretty much been taking over the world? He said that it definitely has been challenging, but he actually found it so surprising how much better it's all gone than he initially thought it would when the pandemic started early last year. He said that there's actually pros and cons to it. Certain things are actually faster when the teams are working from home, and then obviously many things are slower as well. But he said overall he's really happy with how it's gone, all things considered, which is great to hear, because honestly that was probably one of my personal biggest worries leading into the game, just wondering whether COVID would actually affect the game or not. So he sounded really positive about it, which is good to hear. A sort of follow-up question to that was, other than COVID, what's been the most challenging aspect of making this experience? Is working with so many different teams a hard thing to do on a game of this scale? Tompen said that while it is challenging, the team at Ripple Effect, or formerly known as DICE LA, are actually pretty used to it at this point. They've often done this sort of thing in the past in terms of working from a different location on a different time zone and stuff like that. So he said that they've actually handled it really well, just because they have done it for a while now, even before this game was even being worked on. He also said that because they're predominantly working on Battlefield Portal rather than just 2042 overall, each team isn't quite as sort of reliant on each other for certain things. Rather, the teams can still kind of just do their own work, and so the fact that they're not in the same location luckily hasn't really had a negative effect at all. Now, my next question was, in all of your playtesting so far, describe what you would say is your most memorable or fun experience. He pretty much said that his favourite part so far has just been seeing all the like silly and crazy modes that they've been testing out internally, stuff that he just never would have thought of before, and the same goes for most of the team. And while that alone has been a lot of fun, he said that it mostly excites him when he's thinking about the game actually launching, because he just knows the community is going to come up with some absolutely wild game modes, and he just can't wait to see what we do with it once we do get our hands on it later this year. Now, the next question was about balancing, as this is something that I've seen a lot of people talking about already, just because of the rumors of this mode starting a few months ago. And so my question was, with so many different vehicles and weapons from different games and different eras, what have you guys done to assure that all of those aspects stay as balanced as possible? He said that they've essentially got two different types of tuning for the Portal content, in terms of historical tuning and then tuning that's in line with 2042 as well. An example that he used was that for certain weapons, let's just say the Thompson for example, it would obviously not hold up in a modern battle compared to modern day SMGs, so they've essentially buffed it in regards to the game itself, but then once it is at a good level, they kind of go and give it a bit more historical tuning, so stuff like making sure the recoil patterns are still realistic and stuff like that. He said it is still an ongoing process trying to balance so much content, and no doubt they will still be balancing it a long time after the game is out, but the way he explained it definitely sounded like a good mix, and it seems like they are definitely on top of it. Now, the next question I asked was, how much control will the Battlefield Portal allow? For example, can you control any aspect of the game to create like the floor is lava or playing games of tag or hide and seek, or will it need to stay more in line with the traditional feel of a shooter? He mentioned that what they've mostly just been focusing on is rule sets and logic rather than sort of manipulating the actual environment, so when the game launches, stuff like floor is lava wouldn't really be possible unless you can somehow manipulate it in a really smart way. The fact that he didn't straight up say no kind of just shows how strong these tools are, because he's not even really sure what people are going to be able to make when the game comes out. So that is exciting in itself, but yeah, he mentioned that manipulating the assets themselves won't really be possible, only the actual rules and logic of the game, if that makes sense. Now, the very last question that I asked was, what do you think players will enjoy the most about this game mode? Tompen said that it is hard to say what he thinks people will enjoy, but what he hopes people will enjoy the most is just coming back to some of those fan favourite maps and reliving some of our favourite memories in the Battlefield franchise, as well as for a lot of newer players actually getting to experience those maps for the very first time. I personally have a ton of friends from the channel, for example, who actually just got into Battlefield when Battlefront 2 ended, and so I know a lot of these guys are going to be experiencing these old maps for the first time, which is actually so awesome for me as a fan from way back to get to see my own mates seeing these things for the first time. So I absolutely agree with what Tompen said, and that's something that I didn't even think of at first, honestly. He finished up by saying that he's also just really excited to see what people create, and that he hopes the players just enjoy the freedom to pretty much make whatever they want and get to play the community games as well. So that is going to wrap this one up, guys. I hope you guys learned learned some new info in this video, and if you did, then be sure to leave a like down below to help get this news out to even more people. Obviously, the channel is still really small, and I personally think some of this info is super exciting, so let's try and get this video into that dreaded YouTube algorithm and let more people hear some almost behind the scenes information. If you are new around here, then consider subscribing to the channel with those notifications on, as there is plenty more Battlefield 2042 content on the way. Thank you all very much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll see you all out there on the battlefield.